Well, good day. This is Mr. Randy. We're going to start doing 2D drawings this week. In Solidworks, we create our 2D drawings from the 3D models. So we import the 2D geometry into the drawing from the 3D model. There's a couple different ways that you can start a 2D drawing, and I'd like to show both of them to you so you can see the difference. I have one of our earlier assignments up on the screen, and I've saved it. You must save it before you do this. And I'm going to go up here and click on New, and then I can just click on Make Drawing from Part or Assembly. And I'm going to show you both ways to do this because they behave differently. So we're going to make a drawing from a part or assembly, and it's going to ask us which template we wish to use. And this is an inch part, so we're going to select inch drawing. And I'm going to choose my sheet size, so we have the options of A through E. And we'll click OK. There's nothing else we need to do here. It's going to open up a B-size border for me. And then you'll see in the right-hand column, it shows me all my views. And what we do here, it's not obvious from looking at this unless you read this box, is you drag the view onto the sheet. Now I'm going to drag the front view onto the sheet, and I'm going to let it go. At that point, notice that the box has disappeared, and notice that as I move away from that view, it just automatically rotates a view for me off the front view. We don't want to individually insert views because they won't be aligned. So I'm going to pop a top view right here. I'll just click, and then I'll come down, touch the front view, and I'll move to the right, and I'll put in my right side view. We could also do an isometric view here if that's the view we wanted, and that's okay for this part, so we'll just drop that in. Now I can close this dialog box. Now the isometric view, something to note right off the bat, we never show hidden lines in isometric views, so make sure you come over here, and I've just clicked in this viewport. You can see when I mouse into the view, it lights up a little gold box there. Click inside the viewport, and then we're going to turn hidden lines off. You can also do that up here. So you can change the appearance of the view in either place. Doesn't make any difference. We're going to look at these three views and make some decisions about hidden lines. I don't know that it's necessary to show hidden lines in this view, so I might be inclined to just turn them off. Your assignment does not look that way when you look at the handout, but you could turn off hidden lines in this view if you wish. Now, this part has a rather odd scale. You'll notice that the drawing scale down here automatically is filled in and says 1:1. But we need to change the drawing scale for this one. This can be a little big when we bring our dimensions in. So again, this is a viewport, and this is a viewport, and there's a viewport. I'm going to click out in white space, so I want to make sure I'm not lighting up a viewport. I'm going to right click, and we're going to go to Properties. And this is where we change our global sheet scale for our part. And I'm going to change this to 3/4 size, or 0.75 equals 1. Okay? And I'll hit OK. And it's going to shrink my views down. You need to be very careful. When you bring in your first view, let me scroll down. A lot of students, when they want to change scale, go in here and edit it. You are not allowed to do that for me. The title block automatically fills out based upon the sheet scale. So if this box is not checked for the first view that you insert, then the title block will not correspond to the view scale. Okay? So I want you to notice, first of all, that my first view in, remember I brought my front view in first, has a scale of use sheet scale. That means that no matter what my sheet scale, the title block will be correct and the drawing view will be the correct size. If I look at these other viewports, it's going to say use parent scale. This is the parent view because it's the first view I brought in. This is a child. This is also a child. And we would see over here the child also says use parent scale. Okay? So parent view, child, and they should be linked by use parent view. That way, if I change the sheet scale, all these views will change their size. The isometric views that we put in, they can be anything. So I actually would like to shrink that down a little bit. So only the isometric view can you go in and use a custom scale. And let's change that maybe to half size. So we'll put a 0.5 in there. And let's hit enter. And we'll just shrink that down kind of tiny. And we'll hit OK. All right. So there's our little isometric view up in the corner there. And now we have our three views, and we're ready to bring in dimensions and center marks and things. So let's see how we detail this part. If you remember when we did this assignment, and I'll bring this on screen here for just a second. When we did this assignment, let's zoom up on it. And we'll have to scroll over. There we go. Let's stretch this out. When we did this first assignment, this part was a bit unique in that we filleted these corners in the sketch, but the dimensions went to the sharp corners. And you can see that this drawing has sharp corners shown here. Okay? And I think you can notice when I look at the drawing here that we don't see those sharp corners. So I'm going to do this first just so it's easier to see. I want to put the sharp corners in for these three radiused corners here. And I'll show you how to do that. This is a rather weird thing. It doesn't seem like it's not very intuitive, but this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on this line. I'm going to hold the control key down and I'm going to click on this line just like we do when we create a relationship. And then this is the weird part. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to click on the point tool. And watch what happens. It inserts a sharp corner for me. Okay? So the point is placed at the intersection, but instead of displaying the point, when you're in a 2D drawing, it will put in whatever you have identified in the Solidworks settings as the theoretical sharp appearance. So let's do that again. I'll pick this line, I'll pick this line, and again, click the point tool. And then finally, we'll pick these two lines, and we'll click the point tool. Okay? All right, so we've got those in. Let's go ahead and put our center marks in. Again, it's not necessary that you do this first. It's just easier for us right here because the drawing is very clean right now so we can see the center marks. So we have a center mark tool up here, and we have a center line tool up here. These behave a little odd in that once you start them, you have to close them before you can move on to something else. So let's click on the center mark tool. Now, this is a hole. It's all by itself. And here's the center mark dialog box, and we're just going to do a single center mark. And it has default settings, and I'm going to click on that hole, and let's zoom up a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and click outside here and just hit escape. Now that's an appropriate looking center mark. We'd like to see that this extended line bridges the hole. In other words, doesn't have to be exactly 50-50, but that we have bridge on either side, and that it will show in the print when we print it out. So that's a perfectly good looking center mark there. Let's zoom out. Let's go up here, and let's do the center mark tool again. Now, technically, this is a hole pattern because these two holes are dimensioned from a single dimension off this back edge. And so we'd like the center marks to be connected. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the pattern or linear center mark button here. I call this pattern because it's for hole patterns. And now I'm going to pick the first center mark, and then I'll pick the second circle, and it connects them for us, and we'll hit OK. So we get a nice center line connection between the two. Now I have some center lines to put in my views where I see the hidden hole. So let's use the center line tool. Now there are a couple of options for the center line tool. If you don't check this box over here, which we'll do in a minute, you pick the two sides of the cylinder, the hole, and it puts a center mark in. Now for this view, we'll do it a little differently. Let's say select view, and I'll just click inside the viewport. All I have to do is get inside that golden box and click. and it'll center mark. Now, this is a perfect example. I got some extras here. It gave me a center mark for this corner, and it gave me a center mark for this corner. So I'm going to have to do some cleanup. So if you're going to use the view option for center mark tool or center line tool, be careful. You may get some freebies that you don't want to see. So these have to come out for sure. Those are filleted corners. We don't show those center lines in this view. We only would show the two hidden holes. And again, with the hidden lines off in this view, we don't need to show center marks. If you're going to turn hidden lines on, then you've got to put the center marks in this view. Up to you. All right, so I have now all the detail information here that I need. I'm ready for dimensions. Now, I'd like to show you something here. And this is another situation where I'm showing you what not to do. I'm going to bring a dimension in. I'm going to go between those endpoints. You'll notice that by default it comes in with parentheses. I'm going to turn those parentheses off. And that looks perfectly fine. However, let's take a look at this. If I double click this dimension, nothing happens. Okay? I can double click that all day long. Nothing happens. It just brings up the dialog box where I can edit that dimension. I can change the precision and do different things. So that dimension is dead. It's not connected to the model at all. So I'm going to delete that dimension. I want to show you how I want you to do your dimensioning in SolidWorks. What we're going to do is we're going to come up here and we're going to click on Insert Model Items. You can also get it on the Annotation tab, which is where center mark and center line are. Insert Model Items is right here. Okay, so if you can see my mouse there in the upper left corner, that's the Model Items button. Now, we try to leave things in their default appearance at KCC so that you know what it's going to look like if you go to work and do this. So when you look at this feature control or feature manager over here, it defaults to selected feature out of the box when you install SolidWorks, but we want to bring in all the dimensions for the entire model. So these two steps I'm going to do right now, you're going to have to do every time you start working in SolidWorks on a given day. Once you've set it, the rest of that class period, it will remember the settings, but when you come in the next day and do this, you'll have to reset this. So entire model, and then what we want to do is make sure that these four buttons are depressed. You can see they're gray now. We need to bring in dimensions if they're marked for drawing. We need to bring in all the dimensions that are not marked for drawing, which we don't use these two features, so just make sure they're both highlighted. We need to bring in any hole wizard hole locations, and we need to bring in hole callouts. Okay? So all these things need to be brought in. We don't need to bring in counts for patterns. We won't use those in that way. And we don't need to bring in the hole wizard profile, which is the profile view dimensions for the geometry that SolidWorks used to create the hole wizard hole. So these four buttons have to be clicked on. Make sure they're grayed out, and we want entire model. We're going to click OK. Now SolidWorks just spit in, if you will, all of the dimensions for this part that were in the model if there was a view, a proper view for them to come in. If I didn't have this top view in place, I would not have gotten most of these dimensions. There are a few of these that might have popped into the right side view, but most of these dimensions wouldn't have come in. So you must have views in the model for each dimension to show properly in, or SolidWorks won't import them. Now you remember a minute ago I had a 5mm dimension down here at the bottom. And if I double clicked on it, nothing happened. Well, here's that dimension again. It's up at the top now. And I'd like to show you part of the power of SolidWorks. In SolidWorks, the drawing and the model are both linked, and they're linked, if you will, dynamically. If I make a change in the drawing, it changes the model file, and I'd like to show you that. So let's double click on this dimension. And let's change the width of this part to 6 inches. Now, you'll notice that my views now have all got these grids over them. What that means is that something has changed and the drawing hasn't updated yet. So we have to rebuild. So I'm going to go up here to the rebuild button up here, and I'm going to click on that, and I want you to watch that top view. And it just changed and is now 6 inches long. Better yet, let's save this part. We'll just call this temp. And let's open up the model. So I'm going to just right-click in the view, and we can open the part up. It's a fast way to go between the part and the drawing. You can see that the part has changed on the screen here. So let's go to that boss extrude, and let's edit that sketch, and let's change that back to 5. And let's close the sketch. You can see the model is back to its original shape. We're going to save that, and we're going to close it, and the drawing has automatically updated. So if you import all your dimensions, they're live dimensions, and you can change the model. If you found an error, you can change the model by double-clicking on a dimension. And that's an important advantage that we want to take advantage of in Solidworks. So I do not want you to manually put any dimensions in if you can help it. There will always be the occasional situation where you can't get Solidworks to import the dimension, or you can't get Solidworks to put the dimension in the view that it should be in, that you're going to have to manually dimension something. But that may happen once in a drawing, and it won't happen in some of these drawings early on. All right, so let's beautify this drawing. There's a few things we need to look at in this view. First of all, one of the problems with SolidWorks, if you will, you'll notice that we got a nice gap in this corner, and we got a gap here, but depending on how you create the features, the extension lines will oftentimes run all the way into the feature and cover up or not show that gap there. So I'm going to have to pull that back, and I'm going to eyeball that gap, and you're going to have to develop that eye of approximating the gap based upon the ones that SolidWorks gave you. Okay, we want to see consistent gaps, and you're all visual people, or you would not be hanging out in the CAD lab. So I'm going to expect to see appropriate gaps there. If you get too tight and when you print it there's no gap showing or it's minuscule, I'm going to mark that wrong. So you got to make sure you get the right gap, and again, don't go too big. That's just as bad. All right, so that gap's good now. This dimension, I don't want to see this look, so we'll talk about that in class, but I'm going to cover up that gap on that center mark. That's not an appropriate center line look to do that. So I'm covering these gaps. I'm just clicking on the dimension and then dragging that point up. My gap for the theoretical sharp is okay. I'm not crazy about how that's going to print, but that's okay. And I can pull this back. I'm going to pull this back quite a ways. However, the theoretical sharp that's in here, I can't do anything with those gaps. I don't like this look at all. I don't like how it prints. I'd like a nice big gap between this line and the arc, but I can't do that with the theoretical sharps that SolidWorks inserts, so we're just going to live with it. All my gaps look okay over here. Now I have to make a decision on where I'm going to call the radius out and the hole diameters out. Now I want to zoom back just a little bit here. You'll notice that SolidWorks gave me a 3x by r1 dimension over here, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to keep that one, so I don't need this one. This one's redundant. So what I'm going to do is just right-click on it and hide it. The advantage of doing that is if you hide some dimensions that you decide you need later, you can bring them back. Okay? I'll show you that really quick. You go to View, come all the way down to Hide Show Annotations, and all your hidden dimensions are gray. If you click on them, they turn blue again. You can also turn off dimensions, so if I didn't want that dimension, I can turn it off. So whatever you click on flips it. Either if it's hidden, it becomes visible. If it's visible, it becomes hidden. When you're all done, you have to turn that back off. View, and then Hide Show Annotation. All right. So this view is actually looking pretty decent. I'm going to move this whole call out down here. Again, notice that it sorted out that there were 3 of those 750 diameter holes, and it put that right in the note. Let's have a look at our front view here. We have a gap here. We do not have a gap here. I'm going to click on that 1-inch dimension, and I'm going to bring that over. While it put the 950 dimension here, on this edge of the part, I really don't know what this line is. It's really not showing me the profile, but it's showing me the profile very nicely over here. So I'm going to take this dimension, I'm actually going to drag it across, and I want you to notice something. When I get close to the 1-inch dimension, it's going to snap, and you might see a yellow line. It's hard to see, but there's a yellow line striking across those dimensions. It's snapping them together. Now, by doing that, I've messed up the extension line, so I got to pull this one back, and then pull this one back. And that one's too tight. I think you can see that. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to pull that back even further to get the right gap there. We said we were going to keep this dimension. However, we don't like this look. And then I'm going to hide this one because I've already got the hole call out up here. So I'm going to right click and hide that, get out of the way. Now the 3XR1, that's fine, but that's a big radius. We could show the center point and flip that arrow in, which is kind of preferred when we have a big radius like that. So I'm going to flip the arrowhead in. In SolidWorks, it's really easy. You just click on this dot right here, if you can see where my mouse is, and it flips the arrowhead. And that works for any dimension. So I can click on this dimension, I can flip the arrowheads in or out. And then I need a a plus mark here, not the whole big center mark, just a plus mark. So let's look at doing that. I'm going to click on the center mark tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and click this, and we can see that's definitely not what we want. So over here in Feature Manager, I'm going to turn off this checkbox here that says Use Document Defaults, and I'm going to say Don't Extend the Lines by turning that off. And that's the look we want. Okay? I need to cover these gaps on the circle here. Cover these gaps. This is one of the most common mistakes that I deduct points for in drawings, is the gaps on the extension lines or the extra gaps we get around a center mark. All right, let's zoom out a little bit. Now we have this lonely looking right side view over here, and the reason for that is that there's a dimension in the top view that really belongs in the right side view. Again, this is not the profile shape of this section here, so this dimension's in the wrong place. So I'd like to show you how to move a dimension. To move a dimension, you hold the Shift key down on the keyboard, then you click on that dimension and you drop it. Now I want you to notice the dimension would like to be up here somewhere, but I still have the no symbol there, the circle with the slash. It's not until I get on top of the view that it will let me drop it there. Okay? That's a shift and drag. Control drag copies the dimension, which is usually not what we want, but if you ever have to do that, that's how you do it. You control drag to copy a dimension. Now I'm going to zoom up on that 450 dimension, and we'll place it, and you'll notice that my dimension kind of snapped in, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. I'm going to pull this up and get a gap here and drag that one up and try to get about the same gap, and that looks better. All right, so to check dimension spacing, because I know I have some spacing problems over here, if you wish, you can turn on a grid. You click on the eyeglasses here, and here's the grid button, and I'll turn the grid on. The grids are already set up, both for the inch and metric template, to give you the appropriate spacing for dimensioning and view placement. In an inch drawing, these are 1/2 inch. In a metric drawing, they're 12 millimeters, and it will give you appropriate spacing. So let's zoom up on that dimension. I just want to make sure. Here's a grid line, and there's the object line. So look at that distance, and then here's a grid line, and here's the dimension line, and that's the same exact distance. And again, you'll notice, you probably can't tell because you're not moving the mouse, but as I move up, it snaps to that spacing. All right, let's zoom back over here. So this edge is right on the grid almost, and when I drag this over, it's going to snap right there. I'll drag this one over and get it to snap. These are out a little far, and they actually snap right there. So I'm going to pull those in because those were a little far out. This one is about the appropriate distance. All the rest of these look good. This one is also a little out. It snaps right there. I'm going to bring this one down. It should snap in right about there. Make sure you stagger dimension values and those kinds of things. Here's the 3 by 1. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't go through any of the corners here. So you can see all these, there's a corner here and the end of the extension line, the end of the sharp. I want to make sure not to have that dimension line passing right through a corner. That's not good practice. So I'm going to make sure I'm out here somewhere. If your dimension keeps locking to different things, I don't know if you can tell, but my dimension is snapping to various dimensions. If you hold the Alt key down, your dimension will wander for you while you're moving your mouse. That's the Alt key to get it to move freely. All right, I got to get these parentheses out of the way. I'm not sure why they're there. I must have accidentally turned them on. I'll show you that again. Click on a dimension. That little button pops up, and then when you mouse over it, you can turn the parentheses off right there. All right, how are these views looking now? They look pretty good. This one is floating pretty far out again. I'm going to move that in until it snaps. Now, I want to bring the original drawing in for just a sec. Notice that all of the dimensions on this drawing are 2-place decimals. Okay, all the dimensions are 2-place decimals. So you'll see on this drawing, of course, that everything is 3 places. We need to fix that. The fastest way to fix that, if you're in the latest version of Solidworks, is to come right down here at the bottom right corner of your drawing editor where it says IPS. That means I'm in inch, pound, second for my units right now. And don't think you can just change. It doesn't work well. If you'd use the wrong template, this will make a mess of things. But I want to edit the document units, and I want to change my length dimensions to 2 decimal places. Now this is a little misleading because this will also change whole callouts and everything else, but nonetheless, that's the term. Let's hit OK. Now I have all 2-place decimals, and I want to just look over my drawing now and make sure that all my dimensions are in a good location. Now that the decimals have changed. And there's lots of room here for the 0.45. I do want to show you something here. I'm going to bring this drawing in and put it side by side over here. In my drawing, you will notice in the handout that my 0.45 dimension is outside. I need you to be real careful that you follow dimension rules and not necessarily look at where the text is placed in my example pictures. And this is why. This view is very small compared to the full-scale views that we have in this drawing, or the 3/4 scale. And so when I put this in a handout and it's this little tiny view, I have to make the text height and the arrowhead size is much bigger than normal for you to see them. So that often changes my text placement. You'll notice up here the 1¼ inch dimension, the arrows had to be flipped out. There was too tight to have them flipped inside. Likewise, the 0.45 had to come out. That's just because of what was needed to be done for this handout, because the text size and arrowhead size were so large. You follow the dimension rules in your drawing, and the dimension rule is if there is room for the text between the extension lines, that's where it goes. And there's plenty of real estate here. Okay? So I want you to be careful of that. Your placements will not always be identical to mine. In some assignments, I won't even show you placements, so you'll have to figure it all out on your own. Finally, I want to talk about the text that's in the title block here. You do not edit this title block. If you know how to do that, don't. I'm not even going to show you. We'll show you that down the road. The information that goes in the title block comes from one of 2 places. The scale and the file name are pulled right from the data for this project. All of the other boxes in here, except the date, come from the part file. So I'd like to show you where that is. I'm going to open the part file here. And I'm going to go up here to File. If I could get that button to work. File, Properties. And that takes me to the Custom tab here. If it doesn't come to Custom, click on the Custom tab. And this is all the information that actually goes in the title block. You edit these fields and put to fill out title block. Remember to use all capital letters. There's another way to get to that dialog box. If you're into shortcut keys, it's Alt-P. Hold the Alt key down and type a P, and that pops that box up. Then save the part. Once you've changed stuff, save it and close it, and it should update your title block. All right, well, I think I'm about ready to print here, so I've got one more thing I have to do finally, and then we're done. I'm going to zoom full size or fit to screen. And then I need to check my view spacing because our rules say we'd like 1 inch between views of white space or 24 millimeters. Well, I don't have an inch in here. I'm pretty close. And I'd like you to see this. I'm going to grab the principal view, and you'll notice when I move it, it moves the views that are aligned with it, which is very nice. I'm going to pull this down so that I have roughly an inch of white space here. And then a common thing to forget is to take care of this right side view. I need to slide that over so I have about an inch of white space from the edge of this dimension over to this edge here. We want to see equal spacing in our views. It makes the drawing much easier to read and makes it a much nicer looking drawing. And I think we're all set. Try and remember to turn the grid off before you print because the grid prints. I'm not crazy about that, but it's the way it is. If you accidentally print with the grid on, just hand it in that way. I won't deduct any points for it because I hate wasting paper. But try and remember to turn the grid off, and then you are ready to print this drawing. All right, that's the first part of this, and I'll come back with a second video and just share a few more things with you that need to be done this week. As always, enjoy.